Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today we explore the strange world of missing 411, a term coined by a former cop-turned-researcher to describe cases that seem to defy logic, nature, and even time itself. Imagine this. You're on a familiar hiking trail, one you've walked countless times. Maybe you're with friends, family, or perhaps just enjoying a solo moment of peace in a national park, like the back of your hand. One moment, you're there, breathing in the scent of pine and damp earth. The next, you're simply gone, not just lost, but vanished. How can someone disappear from a well-trodden path in familiar territory without leaving a single verifiable trace? No broken branches, no disturbed leaves, nothing for even the most highly trained search dogs to pick up. This isn't just a chilling hypothetical. These are the kinds of perplexing disappearances that form the core of the missing 411 phenomena, meticulously documented by a man named David Paulides. His work, his books, his documentaries, they've ignited this huge, sprawling online community. Enthusiasts and theorists all grappling with these unexplainable events.
It's true. And the sheer number and often the bewildering nature of these cases, particularly in these vast remote wildlands of North America, it taps into a very primal human desire, doesn't it, to understand the unexplainable. When the usual explanations, getting lost, an accident, maybe foul play, when they just don't seem to fit, our minds instinctively start reaching for something more. The profound lack of evidence, the bizarre circumstances you see in so many of these disappearances, it just resonates deeply. It pushes us to search for patterns where, at first glance, others might only see isolated tragic incidents.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Who exactly is David Paulides? What's his background that led him down this fascinating and sometimes, let's be honest, intensely controversial path, investigating these vanishing acts?
Well, David Paulides brings a pretty unique perspective, I think. It stems from his former career. He was a police officer, San Jose Police Department. So his experience in law enforcement, it gave him this meticulous approach, a focus on facts, on evidence. And he then applied that to these really unusual missing person cases. After leaving the force, he transitioned, became an independent investigator, an author, dedicating his time fully to this. And it wasn't just a casual thing. He founded an organization, the Canam Missing Project. Its specific purpose: documenting, collecting, analyzing these particularly anomalous disappearances. The story goes, his journey into the specific area started after a chance encounter with an off-duty park ranger, apparently.
Oh, really? A park ranger?
Yeah, who encouraged him to look into some particularly strange missing persons cases within the national parks. Incidents that even seasoned law enforcement couldn't easily explain away.
Wow. Okay, so he didn't just look casually. He really, really dove in, creating this whole body of work around them. He's the creator of the Missing 411 series, right, which has grown to include, over a dozen books now? And multiple documentaries. I know Missing 411, the film, and Missing 411, The Hunted. So when we talk about Paul and his focus, what's he actually zeroing in on? Is he just cataloging every missing person in a national park? Or is it more specific?
Oh, much more specific. Not at all, just every case. Paulides is remarkably clear about his criteria. He states his focus is exclusively on cases with what he calls unusual characteristics. Yeah. So he's not interested in disappearances that can be readily explained by, standard missing person protocols. For instance, cases where a body is quickly found after an accidental fall, or incidents with clear evidence of foul play, or those where the cause is pretty obvious. He's honed in on those baffling incidents, the ones that seem to defy conventional logic, that leave experienced investigators just scratching their heads. This selectivity, it's really critical to his whole methodology, and it's what separates his work from, say, general missing person databases, which would include all types of disappearances. He's looking for a very particular kind of unexplained vanishing.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because it's not just unusual in some vague sense. Paulides identifies very specific, really unsettling patterns, like a kind of signature across these cases. What are these distinct characteristics he consistently focuses on? Those criteria that take a disappearance from just a tragic accident to something truly enigmatic in his view.
Yeah, this is absolutely the core of the missing 411 phenomenon. It's what makes these cases so compelling, both for Paulides and for that huge community that follows his work. He's laid out this specific set of criteria that, if present, flags a case as unusual enough for his research. One of the most frequently cited, and maybe the most puzzling, is the absence of a scent trail. or any trackable evidence, really. In so many of these cases, victims seem to just vanish into thin air, leaving no discernible scent, even for highly trained search and rescue dogs to follow.
No scent at all, even with dogs.
Exactly. Take the disappearance of Dennis Martin, that little 6-year-old boy in the Great Smoky Mountains back in '69. Massive search effort, hundreds of people, canine units. Nothing. No scent was ever picked up. Now, critics argue, quite rightly, that environmental factors, heavy rain, wind, rocky ground, can obscure or wash away scent, makes tracking incredibly hard.
Sure, that makes sense.
But Paulides points to cases where the conditions should have allowed for a track. He emphasizes the complete lack of scent across all sorts of conditions. It's very strange. Then there's another perplexing characteristic: the sudden and often severe weather changes, happening immediately following a disappearance. Paulides notes these instances where severe, unexpected storms or blizzards just materialize right after someone goes missing.
Out of nowhere.
Pretty much. And these conditions, they critically hinder search efforts, right? And seem to just appear. We're not talking a light drizzle here. We're talking conditions that make an area virtually impassable, that can rapidly obliterate any potential evidence. You see several cases where it was clear weather, then boom, whiteout conditions or torrential downpours within hours of the person vanishing.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's the incredibly frustrating detail: individuals, or sometimes their remains, being found in previously searched areas. Think about it. Search teams meticulously comb specific grids, often multiple times, sometimes using GPS to confirm coverage.
Right, they're very thorough.
Exactly. And yet days, weeks, sometimes even months later, a body or personal items will just inexplicably appear in a location that had supposedly been thoroughly scoured. It just defies logical search and rescue protocols, which are usually so systematic. It's almost as if the object or the person wasn't there during the initial sweep.
That is bizarre, almost like it was placed there later.
Well, that's one interpretation people throw around, or something stranger. Perhaps the most disturbing pattern, for me anyway, involves young children found in impossible-to-reach areas. This characteristic is chilling, and Paulides highlights it frequently. He points to cases where small children, sometimes toddlers, are discovered miles away from where they disappeared, often in incredibly rugged, high-elevation, difficult terrain, places that would be nearly impossible for an adult to navigate, let alone a tiny child.
Miles away. How is that even possible?
Exactly. They're found in locations that completely defy their physical capabilities and the typical speed a wandering child might travel. Now, search and rescue experts do acknowledge that lost kids can sometimes cover surprising distances, Disorientation plays a part. And there are things called fatal funnels, natural terrain features that can draw lost people deeper into difficult areas.
Okay.
But Paulides argues the distances and the terrain in some of his cases go way beyond what's physically plausible for a child that age.
That's hard to wrap your head around. What else?
Another really perplexing detail: victims are often found partially clothed, or with clothing removed entirely, sometimes even neatly folded nearby, even in freezing condition.
Folded in freezing weather.
Yeah. Now, there is a medically recognized phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. It can happen in the final stages of severe hypothermia. As the body struggles, blood vessels dilate, causing the sensation of intense warmth, so the disoriented person starts shedding clothes.
Ah, okay, I've heard of that.
Right. But Paulides highlights the consistency of this across many cases, and sometimes the neatness of the discarded clothing. He argues it doesn't always fit the typical disoriented state of someone suffering advanced hypothermia, suggests maybe something more unusual is happening.
Okay, that's another layer of strength.
Definitely. There's also the observation of odd behavior immediately before the disappearance. Individuals are sometimes seen breaking away from their group for no clear reason, or they express disorientation or just act strangely right before they vanish. It's like something compels them to walk away, or they suddenly get confused in a place they know well. Even experienced outdoors people in familiar territory. This pre-disappearance behavioral shift is a detail Paulides notes quite consistently.
And geographically, any patterns there?
Yes, a repeated geographical observation is that bodies, or signs of the missing, are often found near specific geographical features. Paulides frequently points to locations near large boulder fields, steep ravines, or bodies of water. These are common sites for discovery or last known locations.
So, dangerous areas naturally.
Inherently dangerous terrain, yes. But Paulides argues the consistent association across his gathered cases is what's noteworthy. He suggests a non-random connection there. Furthermore, in many of these cases, there's a striking absence of struggle signs. It doesn't look like the person fought off an attacker or even had a traumatic fall in many instances. They just seem to disappear silently without apparent resistance.
Just gone.
Just gone. And coupled with this, a significant number of cases result in no discovery of remains whatsoever, even after exhaustive, prolonged searches, sometimes spanning years, which is just deeply frustrating for families, for investigators, leaves this permanent void.
Unbelievable. Anything else on the list?
Just a couple more key things. Contrary to what you might expect, a notable number of these disappearances frequently happen in good weather conditions, at least initially.
Oh, interesting. So not always driven by a storm rolling in?
Right. It contradicts the idea that harsh weather is always the primary or immediate cause, though of course weather can certainly change later and complicate things immensely. And finally, Paulides has noted that sometimes victims have pre-existing health conditions, minor ones, sometimes more significant. Though critics argue this detail can be a bit cherry-picked to fit a narrative rather than being a truly consistent, meaningful pattern across the board. Lots of people have some kind of health condition, right?
Right. That's an incredible list of perplexing details, though. It really does feel like these cases share some kind of bizarre, hidden thread. And I guess that's exactly what Paulides felt he discovered when he started digging into individual instances. So what does this all mean when we look at specific cases? The ones that really exemplify these patterns and bring the baffling nature of it all to life?
Absolutely. Paulides frequently cites several cases as prime examples because they illustrate these unsettling patterns so vividly. One of the most heartbreaking, I think, is Jared Negrete. 1991. He was a 12-year-old Boy Scout, vanished while hiking with his troop. Well-used trail, Sequoia National Park, California. Last seen eating lunch with his group. Moments later, just gone.
Just like that. With his troop right there.
Apparently so. Despite an immediate, massive search, hundreds of personnel, sent dogs, even thermal imaging, no trace of Jared was ever found, nothing. It's a stark example of vanishing without a scent trail. The complete absence of remains just leaves this open wound for his family, for the searchers.
God, that's awful.
Then there's the deeply disturbing case of Dennis Martin. We mentioned him earlier, 6 years old. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, 1969. What makes this one particularly eerie is that he vanished, seemingly, right in front of adults. He was playing hide and seek with his brother near a creek. His father and brother reportedly heard a scream or maybe a gurgling sound, accounts vary slightly. When they turned, Dennis was gone.
Gone. Just in that instant.
In that instant. Despite one of the largest searches in the park's history, thousands of acres, rugged terrain, went on for months, not a single piece of evidence. No clothing, no scent, no remains ever found. This fits the no scent trail, no remains, and perhaps the odd behavior pattern, if you consider the scream. Just vanished.
Wow. Chilling.
And we have more modern mysteries too, like Georkins Jr., remember that? A toddler vanished during a family camping trip in Idaho back in 2015. Never found. The initial reports were confusing, contradictory. Family members gave shifting timelines, extensive searches of the remote area, including a nearby reservoir. Nothing. No clues. This case fits Paulides' young children criteria, the no trace aspect. It baffled investigators and really captivated the online community because there are still just no answers.
I remember that case. So tragic.
And then there's Stacy N. Aris, 14 years old, Yosemite National Park, 1981. She momentarily separated from her father and his girlfriend while hiking on a trail, never seen again. Comprehensive search of the high country, challenging granite domes, deep ravines. No sign of Stacy ever discovered. It highlights that pattern of individuals just disappearing from a known location, no struggle, sometimes just briefly separated from others. Classic no trace scenario in a national park setting.
Okay, so those cases really drive home the patterns. Now, when we look at Paulides' core claims, the bigger picture he paints, beyond the individual case patterns, what are the major assertions he makes that have really fueled all this discussion?
Right. Beyond the patterns within the cases, there are two major claims that really stand out and define the missing 411 narrative as presented by Paulides. Firstly, he strongly suggests, or outright claims, depending on how you interpret his work, that there is a deliberate government cover-up. Specifically, he asserts the U.S. National Park Service, the NPS, is not transparent about the true number of missing persons in its parks. He points out, quite correctly, that there's no single, centralized, easily searchable public database tracking these cases across all national parks. He implies this lack of unified data is intentional, or at the very least, highly suspicious.
So the lack of a database itself is evidence of hiding something, in his view.
For Paulides, yes. The absence of this data, or the difficulty in obtaining comprehensive data through things like Freedom of Information Act requests, suggests to him that the NPS might be intentionally obscuring the scale of the problem, maybe to avoid public panic or scrutiny, or perhaps for even more complex reasons.
Okay, that's a big claim. What's the other one?
Building on that, he also identifies what he calls geographic clusters across North America. He suggests these unusual disappearances aren't just random, isolated incidents scattered everywhere. Instead, he argues they occur in specific areas with disproportionate frequency. He points to regions like Yosemite, the Great Smoky Mountains, Rocky Mountain National Park, among others, as having a remarkably high number of these particularly unusual disappearances.
Right, so it gives the impression of something localized, almost like hot zones for vanishing rather than just scattered individual tragedies happening randomly across vast wilderness areas.
Exactly, that's the implication, that there's something specific about these places that contributes to these strange events.
Okay. This is truly where the internet takes these compelling mysteries and just runs with them, isn't it? Spinning these incredibly diverse, sometimes really eerie theories about what might really be behind it all. Once Paulides' work hit the online forums and communities, this speculation just exploded.
Oh, absolutely. It was like fuel on a fire. The compelling nature of these unexplained disappearances, combined with Paulides' meticulous documentation, even if you question his interpretations, it just ignited online speculation. It transformed these isolated tragedies into threads of this larger, unsettling tapestry. And the theories, yeah, they range from the purely speculative, the paranormal, to attempts at finding more grounded, maybe, but still unusual explanations. Probably the most common, the most widely popular theory you see discussed online, particularly among many of Paulides' own followers, involves Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Bigfoot. Really? That's the top theory.
It comes up constantly. And it's important context here that Paulides himself actually has a background in Bigfoot research before missing 411. That connection has led many to believe the creature is somehow responsible. The idea isn't just, an unknown animal attack. It's more that these are highly intelligent, incredibly stealthy entities, capable of moving silently through dense wilderness, evading human detection entirely, and maybe even possessing the ability to, abduct people without leaving a trace. The silent disappearances, the lack of struggle, the ability to traverse impossible terrain, online theorists often attribute these elements to Bigfoot.
Okay, beyond Bigfoot, what else is out there in the speculation zone?
Where the sheer weirdness of many disappearances, especially those cases where people are found miles from search areas or in physically impossible locations, that's given rise to theories about interdimensional portals.
Portals, like stepping into another dimension.
Sort of, yeah. The idea is that maybe victims inadvertently stepped through some kind of temporary gateway, instantly transporting them, either to another dimension or maybe just a completely different part of our world miles away. This theory, proponents say, would explain the suddenness of vanishing, the lack of any trace, maybe even the abrupt appearance of bodies in previously searched areas, and certainly the extreme distances sometimes covered by small children.
Right, that would explain a lot, if true. Very sci-fi, though.
Very sci-fi. And then you have broader fringe theories. Things involving unknown predators, maybe some cryptid not yet cataloged by science, or even alien abduction. These theories posit some kind of non-human entity is responsible, snatching individuals from the wilderness for, who knows what purpose. Paulides himself has actually explored the idea of a connection to UFOs more recently in some of his work, leaning into that broader concept of an unknown non-human agency being involved, suggesting some kind of intelligence behind the disappearances.
So beyond the purely paranormal or cryptid theories, there's also that strong thread of suspicion woven around the official narratives, right? And the land itself. It's not just about what might have snatched people, but what officials might be hiding, or what strange energies the land itself might harbor.
That's exactly right. A huge portion of the online speculation circles back to Paulides' core claim of a government cover-up. You see countless online threads, entire communities, actively speculating that the National Park Service might be deliberately hiding data, obfuscating the true number of missing people in the parks. This belief really stems from that lack of a centralized, easily accessible public database for missing persons across all federal lands. The thing Paulides highlights as suspicious. For believers, this absence isn't just bureaucratic oversight, it's evidence of intentional suppression, maybe to avoid panic, maybe to avoid scrutiny, maybe something deeper.
And the land itself, the geographical aspect.
Yeah, there's a deep fascination with geographical oddities that some internet users believe are linked to these disappearances. People create and share these online maps, purporting to show clusters of cases in strange alignments, frequently near specific topographical features. Massive boulder fields are a big one, remote, high elevations, unusual geological formations.
Like blade lines or something?
Kind of like that, yeah. The implication is these aren't just random points on a map, they're concentrated zones of unexplained activity, maybe tied to electromagnetic anomalies, maybe ancient sites, or some other unknown force within the Earth itself that somehow facilitates or causes these vanishings.
Okay, so a whole spectrum of theories, from Bigfoot to government plots to weird Earth energy. But of course, not everyone buys into these patterns or explanations, especially the more supernatural or conspiratorial ones. What are the counter-arguments? What are the criticisms aimed at Paulides' work from those who take a more skeptical, maybe more data-driven approach?
Right, and the skeptical community offers several really significant counter-arguments. They directly challenge Paulides' methodology, his conclusions, suggesting that while the cases themselves are undeniably tragic, the missing 401 phenomenon as a unified thing might be more of a construct, a result of selective interpretation. A primary criticism, probably the biggest one, is confirmation bias. Critics argue Paulides essentially cherry-picks his data, meaning he only includes cases that neatly fit his predetermined narrative of unusual patterns, while conveniently ignoring the vast number of missing person cases in parks and wilderness that do have perfectly conventional, tragic, understandable explanations.
So he finds the pattern because he's only looking at cases that fit the pattern he expects to find.
That's the argument. It's like looking for shapes in clouds, right? If you expect to see a dog, you'll eventually find a cloud that kind of resembles one, and you ignore all the clouds that look like nothing specific. By selectively presenting information, they contend he creates this perceived pattern where maybe none truly exists in a statistically significant way, or at least not one caused by a single mysterious phenomenon.
Okay, that makes sense as a criticism. What else?
Well, tied into that is the argument that he's ignoring mundane explanations. Many of the cases Paulides features, while profoundly tragic and maybe initially baffling, could have plausible, albeit heartbreaking explanations. Things like falls, especially in rugged, unforgiving terrain where recovery is difficult. Unexpected animal attacks, rare but possible. Severe hypothermia, which we talked about, causing paradoxical undressing and confusion. Or simply getting hopelessly lost due to disorientation, which can happen to anyone, regardless of experience.
Right, the wilderness is dangerous on its own.
Exactly. Critics argue these standard, though devastating, explanations are often overlooked or downplayed in the missing 411 narrative, in favor of the more sensational, less probable ones. Regarding the claim about the lack of a centralized database being suspicious, skeptics push back hard on that. They point out that the NPS not having a single unified public database isn't necessarily evidence of a conspiracy. Instead, it's widely attributed to the messy realities of government bureaucracy. You have disparate operations of various federal, state, local agencies involved in managing vast tracts of land and handling missing persons reports.
Different agencies, different systems, different jurisdictions.
Precisely. They often have their own record-keeping systems, their own ways of doing things. Skeptics argue it's a reflection of administrative complexities, the sheer size of the federal land management system, not some deliberate cover-up designed to hide something sinister. And about those Freedom of Information Act requests Paulides mentions. FOIA allows citizens to request info, but it's complex. Denials or redactions happen often for legitimate reasons, protecting personal privacy of victims or families, ongoing investigations, administrative burden. Interpreting every denial as proof of conspiracy is a logical leap, critics say.
Okay, so the database issue might just be bureaucracy and the clusters. What's the skeptical take on those geographic hotspots?
The idea of clusters also comes under fire. Critics, particularly researchers who've tried to analyze the data statistically, suggest that these clusters are often not statistically significant when you account for other factors. They can frequently be explained by simpler things, like areas with exceptionally high visitor numbers. Think about it. Places like Yosemite, the Great Smoky Mountains. They're incredibly popular, millions of visitors every year.
More people means more potential incidents, right?
Exactly. Combine huge visitor numbers with inherently rugged, dangerous terrain that poses risks even to experienced hikers, climbers, etc. It naturally leads to more incidents and therefore more missing person reports in those specific areas. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a mysterious phenomenon at play. It could just be a function of popularity and risk. These are often areas of high risk recreational activity.
That puts a different perspective on the clusters.
Yeah.
Any other major criticisms?
Yeah, a few more related to methodology. Paulides has been criticized for not always fully disclosing his sources for some of the information he presents. Makes independent verification difficult. Also, for relying heavily on anecdotal evidence stories, recollections, rather than always grounding claims in verifiable public data or official reports accessible to everyone. And as we touched on with FOIA, interpreting denials or difficulties in obtaining information as automatic proof of conspiracy, rather than acknowledging the potential legitimate reasons an agency might withhold or redact certain details. These are all significant methodological concerns, especially when you view the work through the lens of, say, academic research or rigorous investigative journalism. There's also the criticism that he may be profiting from fear, using a sensationalist approach to sell books and documentaries based on these tragedies.
Right. It's definitely a complex picture with strong arguments on both sides. And it's fascinating how these theories, the criticisms, the counter-arguments, how it all spreads and gains traction, especially with new audiences online. The internet, for better or worse, has really been a massive amplifier for the missing 411 narrative, hasn't it? Turning it into this kind of modern-day campfire story for the digital age.
Absolutely. The digital age has been absolutely crucial to the spread and, frankly, the popularization of missing 411. Reddit is a prime example. You've got these huge active subreddits like Harmissing 411 itself and Unresolved Mysteries. They host these long, incredibly intricate threads where users share theories, they dissect individual cases in painstaking detail. People even try to crowdsource their own maps of disappearances, overlaying them with geological features, supposed vortex points, Bigfoot sighting databases, all that stuff.
Wow, really getting into it.
Oh, yeah. These communities are incredibly active. Some have hundreds of thousands of members. They provide this platform for continuous discussion, speculation. It creates a sense of shared investigation almost.
And beyond Reddit.
Beyond Reddit, platforms like TikTok and YouTube have been huge. They've been instrumental in introducing Missing 411 to totally new, often much younger audiences. You'll find these short-form videos, longer deep dive style analyses. They get millions of views, featuring those viral mats highlighting the alleged clusters, sometimes eerie reenactments of last sightings, dramatic breakdowns of strange 911 calls potentially related to these cases.
The visual element makes it really compelling, I bet.
Exactly. The visual, often bite-sized content format makes the mystery highly accessible, highly shareable. It constantly fuels new interest, brings these decades-old cold cases right back into the public consciousness with this renewed vigor. It really demonstrates the power of digital lore, how easily complex narratives can spread virally, morphing into a phenomenon much larger than just the initial case files or books.
So after walking through all these baffling details, the patterns, Paulides highlights the really wild theories and also the very rational counter-arguments. What's the thread of truth we can realistically follow here? How do we navigate that tricky line between genuine research and the truly unsettling cases and the potential creation of a compelling but maybe misleading myth? It feels like we're constantly balancing our very human desire for answers with the inherent, often just indifferent mystery of the wilderness itself.
That is the crucial question here, isn't it? And it's multi-layered. What Paulides gets right, I think, is undeniable in some ways. He has brought a lot of much-needed attention to real, often very cold, missing person cases. Cases that might otherwise be forgotten, buried in old files, or just remain totally obscure. He certainly highlighted the inherent mysteries and dangers of wilderness disappearances, which can indeed be profoundly baffling, even without invoking anything extraordinary. Some people truly do vanish without a readily available explanation in the wilderness. Well, it doesn't always give up its secrets easily, no matter how hard search teams look. His work has undeniably spurred important conversations, raised awareness about the limitations of search and rescue sometimes, and the profound difficulties faced by the families of the missing. He's highlighted the genuine limits of our conventional investigative frameworks when they come up against the sheer indifference and unpredictability of nature.
Okay, so he shines a light on real difficult cases. But what about the omissions, as you put it? Where does the line blur?
Right. The omissions are where that line blurs significantly and where skepticism, I think, rightly enters the conversation. Paulides often seems to downplay or sometimes outright dismiss the more conventional yet still incredibly tragic explanations, the ones that might otherwise account for many of these incidents. Factors like sudden acute medical events, a heart attack, a stroke, a seizure leading to disorientation or incapacitation, falling into hidden crevices or abandoned mine shafts, which exist in some of these areas, succumbing to exposure, even in seemingly mild conditions if you're unprepared or injured, or simply succumbing to the elements in ways that complicate recovery animal scavenging, dispersal by water. All of these are depressingly common possibilities in vast wilderness environments. These possibilities are often set aside in the narrative if they don't neatly fit the specific, unusual criteria Paulides has established.
So the thread of truth is that real people do go missing in genuinely strange and tragic ways.
Yeah.
But the overarching pattern Paulides describes might be more a product of selecting specific data points and our very human need for compelling narratives, rather than some underlying, unifying, mysterious phenomenon.
That's a very good way to put it. That's certainly the skeptical viewpoint, and I think it holds considerable weight. The pattern might be in the selection process, not necessarily in the underlying reality across all disappearances.
And it seems like the sheer wildness of nature itself plays such a significant, often just unforgiving role in these mysteries, regardless of any other factors people might try to impose upon it.
Oh, absolutely. We tend to romanticize nature, don't we? See it as this serene escape. But fundamentally, it's both beautiful and incredibly unpredictable. It's vast, it's powerful, and it can be utterly unforgiving. Its sheer scale, its untamed elements. They inherently create countless opportunities for mystery, for trauma, for human error, even for the most experienced individuals. A wrong step on unstable ground, a sudden, rapid medical emergency miles from help, an unexpected and violent change in weather, a hidden danger like a sinkhole, a deep crevasse, an avalanche chute. Any of these can turn a routine hike into a life-threatening situation in an instant. Nature doesn't care about our plans, our experience level, our expectations. It can conceal evidence, it can destroy clues, and it can confound even the most sophisticated search efforts, leaving behind these profound, often unanswerable questions. The wildness itself is a powerful contributing factor to these enduring enigmas. It's fully capable of swallowing up a person without leaving a trace.
And it seems our human brains are just wired to seek something more, aren't they? Something beyond simple accidents or the vast indifference of nature. Why did these particular stories, the missing 4101 cases, resonate so very deeply with us, prompting such a strong desire to find a pattern, some hidden meaning?
It's a really profound point. It taps directly into a fundamental human need to find patterns, to find meaning, especially when we're faced with the unknown, the chaotic, or tragic. When something defies our understanding, like a person just vanishing off the face of the earth despite massive efforts to find them, our minds instinctively try to fill that void. We crave an explanation, any explanation sometimes. And it's often more psychologically satisfying, maybe even comforting in a strange, paradoxical way, to believe in a grand conspiracy or an interdimensional portal or some mysterious, perhaps malevolent force like Bigfoot than it is to simply accept the harsh, often mundane, brutal realities of accidental death, or getting hopelessly lost and succumbing to the elements without a clear narrative arc, without blame.
So Paulides' narrative kind of gives shape to the shapeless.
Exactly. It taps directly into those primal fears we have of the wilderness, of the dark, of the unknown, and it provides a structure, potential explanation, however outlandish it might seem to skeptics. It gives a shape to the shapeless, a reason to the inexplicable. Ultimately, the missing 4011 phenomenon isn't just about inexplicable disappearances. It's also this profound mirror reflecting our innate human need to impose order on chaos, find meaning in tragedy, and assign agency, assign cause to the random and the unknown, especially when it happens in the vast, silent theater of the wild. And this whole phenomenon also serves as an incredibly powerful case study, doesn't it, on the importance of critical thinking, of demanding robust data analysis, maintaining healthy skepticism when we evaluate these really compelling stories, especially when information might be presented selectively or when our emotions run high because of the genuinely tragic nature of the events. It becomes absolutely paramount for us as listeners, as thinkers, to question assumptions, seek out multiple perspectives, look for mundane explanations first before jumping to extraordinary conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thought. Why might this particular cluster's theories, this missing 411 narrative, be gaining even more traction right now in our current climate? Beyond just our inherent need for patterns, is there something about our modern world making us more susceptible?
I think there absolutely is. The missing 411 narrative seems to resonate particularly strongly, maybe post-pandemic. We've seen this significant surge in people seeking outdoor activities, right? Venturing into national parks, wilderness areas more than ever before, as a means of escape, recreation, reconnecting with something tangible. This increased exposure to the wilderness naturally leads to more incidents, more people getting lost, injured, needing rescue, which then, for some, feeds directly back into the existing narrative of mysterious disappearances. It creates this kind of feedback loop. And concurrently, there's arguably been this general increase in engagement with digital lore, with online communities exploring alternative narratives, content that challenges official accounts or delves into the fringes of reality. Conspiracy theories, unresolved mysteries, they thrive online. Missing 411 fits perfectly into this broader cultural landscape. It finds fertile ground in a public that is increasingly online, sometimes distrustful of traditional institutions or media, and naturally drawn to compelling, unresolved mysteries that offer alternative explanations to the mundane or the officially sanctioned tragic. It's a story that continues to evolve and find new audiences in the digital age. So, is Missing 411 a warning about our limits in understanding nature or something much stranger?
That's the question we're left to ponder, long after the search parties have packed up and the trails grow silent once more. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the strange world of Missing 411 here on Threads of Truth. Next time on Threads of Truth, we return to the suburbs and a case that sparked outrage across the internet. What really happened to Tamla Horsford at that Georgia sleepover in 2018? We'll see you then.